Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really pleased to be joined today by a returning guest. Always like a returning guest, but it's been a while since I've interviewed Natalie, actually. So welcome back, Natalie, to the podcast. And today we've got a really interesting topic. Again, something that maybe we don't talk about enough. And actually, some people might think it's a little bit negative, but actually we're being realistic. That's what I like to say, because we in marketing particularly, we're guilty of saying everything's brilliant, everything works, and it works like magic. But we want to also provide, some guidance to people where it doesn't always work out to plan. Although we do obviously hopefully see success at the end. But yeah, before I do that, I'll just hand over to Natalie quickly, just to introduce yourself to the audience again, or introduce yourself, I should say.
Sure. So my name is Natalie Kurgan. I am the Senseye training lead for delivering Senseye to customers. So that means that I work directly with customers and with other people who are delivering Senseye to get it set up and ready to go.
Excellent. So, and the reason why I'm going to ask you this question first of all, it's almost asking you why are we talking about this today? Because actually the inspiration, as we sort of discussed, was from yourself and our colleague Chris, because we were in an internal meeting and you were sort of talking to us about a particular customer. Not that we'll go into particular specifics today, but we'll talk more broadly about it. But so from your point of view, Natalie, why are we talking about this today? Cautionary tales of predictive maintenance.
Yeah, I think it's really important that not only internally we share the struggles that we have, because really they're not unique. When we have struggles, it's often something very similar across different customers that we have the struggles in. It might be really specific circumstances, but it always kind of comes down to the same thing. So I think it's important that we talk about it. And it's not obvious. When I started, I thought the struggles would be something else than they actually are.
Yeah. So actually, well, let's compare that first of all. So what did you think it was compared to what it is? That's a really good start.
Yeah, well, I thought predictive maintenance was just a question of technology. You throw enough money at it, you get the technology, you can do predictive maintenance. Turns out that that's the easy part. Not saying it is easy, but it is the easy part. The much harder part is just people and culture and a lot of misconceptions around PDM and AI, these buzzwords that go around.
Yeah, and so let's start. I mean, exactly what you described your role at, helping to implement Senseye. So how do we apply this within that sort of phase of a project, the implementation side?
Sorry, what do you mean exactly?
Oh, sorry. So so we talked about these challenges and people face. Let's start with the implementation of the platform and what sort of challenges are faced at that point.
Right. Okay. So when I get involved with a customer, it's usually like after the purchase order is signed. So it's signed, and then what we have to do is work with the team, the customer's team, to figure out what assets they want to monitor. And that alone can be tricky because what we call an asset and what they call an asset may not be the same thing. And if we don't know that we're not on the same page right away, instant problems, right? So we have to align on that. And then we have to select what are the best assets to monitor. There's another sticky point because a lot of customers want to reasonably go for the most complicated assets that cause them the most headaches. We are saying this is tricky. Driving condition indicators to get into the app is tricky. I know the app really well. You know your assets really well. Let's start with something simple so I can show you how to drive these condition indicators so that you can actually help us more when we get to the complicated things. And we can show value in the meantime. Anyway, so that's just the very first two things, and they're difficult already. Data quality is always tricky, but these are the technical aspects, right? We know how to work around these. The problems that we encounter that are harder for us because we can't solve them for the customer is, do they have support from the top? Do they have support from the bottom? Does the people at the bottom want this as equally as the people at the top? And are they all involved in steering where this project goes? If you have people in the room who aren't interested, they don't want to be there. Maybe they have a more toxic work environment. They're just not motivated to do this. It's really hard to get things done. I've made this comparison before. I don't remember if it was with you in the other podcasts, but I can compare predictive maintenance to weight loss journey, right?
Right.
If you want to achieve weight loss, you might get a series of apps on your phone to help you do so. One of them might be like a fitness app. One might be, a calorie tracking app, sleep app. I don't know. So if you think of Senseye as a fitness app, just getting the app and putting your information in it isn't going to result in weight loss. You need the other tools, and you need to actually do the thing. You need to use it and follow it and engage with it and make it a central part of your strategy. Senseye is exactly the same for predictive maintenance, and that's one of the big things that I think we miss, is that we don't have the full engagement of people at the top and people at the bottom to really integrate Senseye into their wider PDM strategy, because Senseye alone is not PDM.
And I guess from your point of view, Natty, why is there such a disconnect between those two, different types of stakeholders and completely different types of stakeholders as well? But maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, that's something that I'm not too sure of. I haven't really been in their shoes, but I think people at the bottom these days, I can see they're really stressed, they're overworked. There's not enough of them. The workforce is kind of dwindling. They're losing people with expert knowledge. They're just, retiring and taking everything they know with them. And then people at the top maybe have different incentives for buying something like Senseye, or maybe it's come along with a different, set of tools that they're getting. So that's where a disconnect can come from. But we can really tie it together, because the point of Senseye at the end of the day is to make the workers more efficient. And if they don't get that message across, then there is upfront effort. There is an uphill bit where you're putting in more effort, of course, to onboard a new tool like this. But the end result should be that the workers are more efficient and can better use their time. But if they don't know that, because they're not, communicating with each other very well, then that can be a struggle just to get them on board.
That's so true, and I really like that comparison. I think it must have been someone else you explained that one to, but I completely get that. For someone like me, who's again not very technically minded, I guess. But I've actually written down here another one of your comparisons as well, if you don't mind me sort of saying as well. So you sort of described sometimes Senseye being sold, or not being sold, but being introduced into companies where it's like selling a shiny car without roads. But again, I think it's what you said earlier on, or just before, about thinking about technology, shiny AI, cool technology, before what's the business issues that we're trying to resolve here. I guess it's along that sort of thing.
We see it a lot now. We see folks, and I'm not saying it's like the end, like we can't make it work. We can, but we can't do it alone. We need the customer to understand as well, hey, this isn't working very well, and here's why. A lot of folks, they want to make the jump to PDM without really working towards PDM. They don't do condition monitoring yet, or condition-based maintenance. They're doing planned and reactive maintenance, and now they want to do PDM. And I don't blame them. I would want to do that too. But they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have reliability engineers. Sometimes they don't have a CMMS, computerized maintenance management system. So they're using maybe Excel to track work orders. So it's like they're starting further back on their journey towards PDM. And that's okay. We can work with that, but we need you to meet us halfway, right? We can help, but we can't just solve everything. It's just another tool that people are going to have to use. And if it's not in the hands of the right people, it's not going to produce value. Even though it works great. Senseye works great. I'm not making this sound very good. Senseye is a great tool. It works great, provided you have the right data going in and the right people looking at it. If you don't have those things, then it's not going to give you so much.
Yeah, so I guess what you say, there needs to be some sort of like groundwork of, whether it's technology, whether it's data, but you even said, culture as well. There's got to be sort of a groundwork of things in place to make predictive maintenance work. You can't just sort of jump ahead and expect things to start happening. You need to sort of lay the groundwork first and realize it's a bit of a process, to get towards predictive maintenance.
So if I could just tell a little bit of a story about, where this came about, where you got the idea to do this podcast. I won't go into
Yeah.
really specifics, but we started working with the customer. They were very eager, the people at the top, to, get the system in place. They were really invested, and that was great. But then when they handed it off, when it officially kicked off, everything was in the app. The team we were given to work with, they were wonderful people, but they were not the right people. We would show up to meetings, and they would be the most painfully awkward meetings, because we would be asking direct questions, trying to help them understand why cases were raised and what they might do about it. And we were met with silence. There were no clear leaders in the room. They didn't know how to interpret data. They'd never seen the data for their machines. They didn't know what it meant for the condition of the machines, and they didn't know what to do about it. They're like, yeah, that is an interesting case, but we don't know what to do about that. We don't know what that means. So what do we do? So we tried escalating, and it got nowhere. We tried many times to escalate. It got nowhere with the higher ups, because they were, as far as they were concerned, it's done. Senseye's implemented. It's not done. So we have the wrong people in the room. Eventually they stopped showing up. We wouldn't get told that, sometimes that they wouldn't be there, because it's like a side project for them. They're taking their time to use this thing, but they don't know what they're doing, and they're not getting value from it. So why should they use it? So what they ended up doing, major credit to this company, because like I said, we can only do so much. We can bring up to the higher ups that there's a problem, but it's up to them to actually do something about it and hear us. It'd be really easy to just blame Senseye for not working well, when it could be any tool. If you don't have the right data and the right people, it's not going to work. So they did a whole restructuring. They brought one of our people down to this, month-long work session to figure out, how do we fix this? And they kind of made a new department. They brought new people in, and that's who we've been working with ever since. And these people get it. They understand how the data relates to the machines. They're curious. They're clever. They're thinking of new ways to manipulate the data to get new condition indicators that mean something to them. So now we're seeing really good success with them. But if they hadn't done that, it would have just fizzled out. If they're not interested, they're not getting value, it'll just fizzle out. They won't use it.
Yeah. Like I said, I did start this off by saying on a negative topic. I think when you use the word like cautionary tales, it makes it sound like maybe we should change the name of this podcast, because actually that's a really fantastically positive story, and what a turnaround. I mean, I guess what I'm interested in first of all is, like, why were the wrong people sort of in place to start with? How did that sort of happen?
Misconceptions about what PDM is. I think it was the misconception that Senseye is PDM. And like, okay, we get this tool and we'll get these results, but there's you have to connect the dots. And sometimes there's many points in between, right? So they got the tool, they thought they had it, they thought they'd get all this success, but yeah, it was just these misconceptions. It was also prior to our sort of knowledge platform days, or it was in the very beginning of when we have this full guidance on how to deliver a project. I don't think, even if we had that fully in place, I still don't think it would have made a difference. Because the other problem was people didn't communicate with one another. Cross-departmental communication did not happen, which is wild to me a little bit. Communication from the top bottom to the bottom up, it didn't really happen. So I feel like no matter what we did, it wouldn't have, it kind of had to go the course that it did. And they're not the only ones that we've seen that with. That's kind of a common theme.
Yes, I think our colleague who is between the two of you, Chris, had this discussion, and it was described at one point as like a war room, but in the sense of everyone getting around the table and just trying to work this out.
That's what they called it for 5 weeks.
Wow,
yeah.
5 weeks.
It was also figuring out, are the assets in the app even the right assets in the app? So they were starting completely over.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a huge amount of effort, but it did the trick.
And like I said, as much as we can encourage customers, I mean, the drive must have come from themselves. What sort of sparked that sort of, we need to do something about this and and get going?
I don't think it was a good spark. I think they were coming up on their year since they'd had it, and they were really talking up, the app and how great it was to their higher ups. And then a year came around and they missed the mark completely. They did not get the value that they were expecting to get. and they were kind of like panicking, like, oh no, now this looks really bad, right? So it was, I feel awful that it kind of reached that stressful state, but I think that was the catalyst. That's the other thing that we make sure to do as well in the beginning, very beginning of a project. We need customers to figure out what is the value. What value do you want to see? What are your key performance indicators? If they don't know, we have a problem. What are you trying to achieve? What's the point? Why do you want this, right? So if we can get that in writing in the beginning, we can help them track it throughout time so that when that year comes up or however long, when they go and look and see, hey, have we met our marks? Yeah, you can see them right in the app. You can track them in the charts.
And I think something else you described in the internal session we had, Natalie, is about how there was like an early escalation point. So this, because I mean, there's probably other examples where there wasn't an early escalation point and it just carried on for months or years or whatever. But there was a really sort of early intervention there. How important sort of is that to sort of get things back on track?
I think it's critical. Every week we waste is a week of no value for the customer. And that adds up. And I think, we all kind of fall into the trap of like, oh, okay, they say it's just going to take a little bit longer. We'll just wait. And then next thing you know, it's been 6 months and they don't have data in the app. So at this point, I'm a very much proponent of the first sign of a red flag, escalate it, change something, do something. As far as like getting data in the app, we have sort of short-term solutions. They can send us manual data exports, like file transfer, like literally email me this file and I'll get it into the app every day. And we'll get it in for 10 assets every day until your data's in for everything, something like that. I think that's a big lesson learned for a lot of organizations and this is really an internal thing or like a Siemens thing, is the first sign of something going a little bit sideways, we need to escalate it so we don't get to that point.
Yeah, and I guess we've talked about, and it's great that this particular customer sort of, taking it on themselves, to turn things around. But what's our role sort of in this as well as Siemens, in terms of encouraging that sort of turnaround as well?
That is so difficult to say because we are just like, as far as Senseye goes, instead of the wider Siemens team, we're just an app. But we've done this so many times. We know what works and what doesn't work. So when we see people coming in and they don't have a CMMS and they don't have a PDM strategy in place at all, we say, well, where are we going to fit? How are you going to use it? And so in the design phase, before you get any data into the app, we sit down with the team and we fill out this PowerPoint. It talks about, we fill it out with like the people that are in charge of the deployment of the project with the customer side, the maintenance manager and whoever else. And it talks about, okay, here's an overview of what Senseye is. Here's what we're trying to achieve. Here's the assets we're starting on. Here's the other softwares we have in place. Here is how it fits together. And it's really meant, we put it together, the presentation, and then once we start getting data in the app and we're ready to bring in the end users, we facilitate that conversation between the higher ups and the end users so that the end users have a place where they can ask questions and provide more input and say, well, actually, we're interested in this, or, so that everyone's kind of on the same page. So that's our attempt at setting the stage, but we can't do it for them.
No, exactly. Because that's and I think maybe it is a natural thing to think that you buy technology and then you then implement technology, or you get access to technology, and then you just use technology, and that's the classic assumption. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And the thing is, too, with Senseye, you get someone like me for a while. We don't just hand it to you and say, all right, good luck, see you later. We work hand in hand with our customer. We want the same things. We want them to be as successful as they do. So we don't just give it over like you might if you get an Excel license,
Yeah, and that's easy to forget because I know there's, of course, every company saying, oh, it's not a customer vendor relationship. It's a collaboration. And it's almost like a cliche to say that, but actually we're telling the truth here, guys, when we talk about Senseye Predictive Maintenance. But it is, you're not just here's the app, off you go, hope it works out for you. Here's a help center. And we do have a good help center, I should say, as well. But for if you want to do self-support, but it's the team really, people like yourself and the customer success team that really, really do, like you said, arm in arm, hand in hand, however you want to say it, with the customer.
I genuinely feel like we're more of a partnership than a vendor client. I am actually genuinely friends with a number of my customers just from working with them for so long, and we get to know each other on a personal level. So it's really nice. And when you kind of get that relationship, more comes out about their culture and their environment, and then when that comes out, we might be able to kind of help and foster that. So we stick around so long because there is definitely a learning curve with the app. And that can kind of deter some folks. They think, you throw your data in and you get results right away. But the app gives you what you give it. It can run, if you provide it decent condition indicators, it can run on that sort of default settings and just give you, alerts, and they'll be decent. But if you get clever and you start thinking, how else can I use this data? I have this other data in the PLC. How can I use that? And how can this make some sense? So the more you put in and the more clever and curious you get, the app can just be astounding.
And actually, so that's an interesting segue into a very topical thing at the moment, including just yesterday as well. We did an event about it. So the Copilot, Gen AI. I want to link it to this conversation as well. So do you think, hopefully it's a positive answer, is that this fantastic functionality is going to help with some of these sort of challenges you mentioned today? And again, we're not talking about technology solving everything, but in its own way can help, support.
I think it can help in a lot of ways, and I'll get into those ways, but it still requires somebody to give it information. You need to tell it when you're working on the machine and what you've done specifically. When you close a case, you need to be really specific. What was this case about? Was it good? Was it bad? What happened in the machine? The more specific you get, the better results it gives you back. I think one of the amazing things it can do is, as you get expert users, like people who've been around for decades with these machines, they know them like the back of their hand. As you get those people in giving Senseye information about these machines, it's captured. So if those people retire, it's in there. The system knows, and it can feed it back to you when it's relevant. It's only going to get better. This is like day 2 of its release. So it's pretty cool.
No, exactly. It's only a starting point. But that's really interesting. Again, it's just every conversation about this is like, it's great having cool technology, and I've said this many times on the podcast. We don't want it to come across as gimmick, cool, really cool, fancy. Oh, it does all this chat stuff. It's always on what's best for the customer and the outcomes, and that's how the product will be developed. As I spoke with Dan yesterday. But what you're saying is, the more you put into it in terms of your knowledge and your feedback and everything else, the better. But that's always been at the fundamentals of Senseye anyway, right?
That's how machine learning works. You have to give it stuff. You have to use it. I think we've had some concerns before about, on both sides. People are like, it's going to take my job. I'm like, it's really not. Somebody has to use it. It's just a tool. And then on the flip side, people want it to do all the work. And I'm like, no, you still have to look at it, because there's a lot going on to this machine that's not captured. If there's anything, external factors influencing the data, and the app doesn't know that, it's going to tell you that the data is changing, and you're going to know, it's just because we took apart the housing and didn't put in a maintenance event, whatever, they did something. The app can't just know it. So it does need to be used. It is getting smarter and better and helping you make decisions. That's what it does. It helps you know when to make decisions, and it helps you to figure out what decisions to make, but it can't make them for you.
No, exactly. I mean, maybe it doesn't help because we've described the Copilot as like a virtual maintenance person, so maybe that description doesn't quite help. But I think
it's more like me. It's going to take my job.
Maybe, but hopefully not. But no, it's interesting because again, I've talked to a customer, one of our customers in Canada actually, who so they were. Their site is like completely remote, so it's very difficult to get to. So they like the fact that Senseye sort of monitoring stuff while they're, so that they can be warned about something and then, plan it in arrive on site, do what they need to do, and that kind of thing. So that's where this sort of virtual maintainer idea, and actually that's separate to any Copilot or Gen AI stuff. The app's sort of doing that anyway, but this is like another layer of assistance, let's call it. I don't know.
The app isn't doing anything a person, well, it kind of is doing something a person couldn't do with Copilot, but with the actual data analysis and the AI that's looking at your data and telling you when something needs your attention, it's not doing anything a person wouldn't be able to do with their own eyes. It's just doing it 24/7 on thousands of pieces of equipment. So no longer do you have to be poring over the data looking for the same things the algorithms are looking for. Let it do its thing. Use your time somewhere else, and it will tell you when certain things may need your attention.
It's almost like scaling your best people. It's almost like helping them to scale themselves. If you like, say, you put the inputs into the system, that's how it should work. If it's done like that, I guess. I wanted to because you mentioned about the knowledge platform as well, and the example you gave was before that had been developed. But so first of all, I guess it'd be great for the audience to understand this, like the origins of it. I guess why was it created in the first place, and what is it in practice?
So the knowledge platform basically pulls together all the best practices of the delivery team and our customer success management team, and also our pre-sales team, solutions engineers. So it's got all of our best practices, all of our years of collected experience put together in kind of one place in a step-by-step guide to delivering a project. Here's the things to consider. At this point, you need to do this. Make sure you reach out to this person. It gives you lots of templates to fill out, like the roles and responsibilities of your customer. So we know who all is involved. And if we see something going wrong with the data, we know who to reach out to. It kind of helps to keep everybody on the same page. It is custom. So it's 16 steps from purchase order time. So before that, we have like this scoping phase of figuring out, what do you have? What do you need? There's 4 steps involved in that. And then we have 4 additional phases: design, deploy, operate, and refine. So design is where I come in. That's when we figure out, what are your assets? How many do you have? Can we break them down? What data do you have? How does it relate to the condition of the machine? How do we derive condition indicators? How are we going to integrate? And we do that PowerPoint, like I talked about with getting everybody aligned, and then we get your data in and deploy. So I won't go too in depth, but there's a full process there, and we put it together custom per customer so that we see what needs there are. Like there's a step, for instance, involving sensor installation. If you have sensors, we don't need to do that step. So if your integration is already basically there, we might rearrange things a little bit just to speed it up.
Yeah, and actually, what I'd put, because I know we're only on a shorter podcast now, but I actually joined. You did a recent webinar to our, to a US, I guess, based audience recently, which I joined as well as a UK based person. But which is really interesting. So I think that's a great place to point people actually if they want a breakdown of the stages of what happens and what to expect. So we'll certainly point people there. But one thing I just wanted to comment from that session, which I listened to, which is interesting, because I learned a lot as well, I must say, where you said about you sort of can jump back and forth. So even though you might be at this stage, actually, when you put onboarding new assets, sometimes you need to take, go back to that stage. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a linear, necessarily a linear process.
It's a very cyclical process. And when we work through the process, we kind of think of the steps, not every step, but a lot of them with regards to each asset type. So, okay, let's say you want to get motors in first. Let's say you have 1,000 of them. I don't care. It's easy to get one motor in as it is to get 1,000 at this point, which is great. So I'd rather you get more because that's more value. So we start with motors. We go through the asset discovery process. We figure out what data is available. How do we need to manipulate it? Do we need to remove the off states from the data? All this stuff. We get the motors into the app. And while the app is learning and we're configuring the motors, we go back and we start with another asset type. And we just keep going through this process until everything is in. So it's good to start with the simpler things so the customer can figure it out. We get them in really quick. Like, I don't really care what your motors are. They're all basically the same. We know, we've seen it before. So we can get it in almost without your help, but it's good to involve the customer so they understand the process and what the app needs to see to be the most successful That way, when we get to some crazy asset types that I've never seen before, they can help us in saying, hey, I think if we did this to the data, then that could be a condition indicator for that, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, because you touched on that earlier, actually, that I think a common, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but when people come to us, they're often saying, oh, we've got this really special, very niche asset. We really need you, and it's so critical to everything that we need you to monitor this one asset. And that's, I guess that's a common thing, right?
Yeah, so I guess the thing is, you have to think about what's the point of Senseye. To me, the point is to monitor hundreds, thousands of machines without you needing to do it yourself. And then we also have to think, what is an asset? If you have some huge piece of equipment that actually, let's think of a fan, one of those big industrial fans. A customer might call it a fan. Here's our fan. I might call that a motor, a gearbox, and a fan, like an impeller, right? To me, it might be 3 assets if they all have data. And as you break it down, it actually gets a lot simpler to drive condition indicators. But also those really big complex machines that are already a headache for them, if it's just one, they probably have somebody on it all the time, monitoring it, looking at its data is probably already super monitored. So let's get in like 1,000 things that aren't monitored. And then while those are generating value, we can focus on that really complicated thing.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it allows, to scale expertise, which you could never cover thousands of machines. And that's where, like I said, where the value is really driven from. So as we sort of draw to a close, I guess like we do on, I think, most of these podcasts, we sort of like to give some takeaways. I think there's lots of takeaways in this episode anyway, which has been great. But just to sort of summarize in very concisely, I guess, or concisely as we can, about how to implement a predictive maintenance solution. But, the key essentials people need to have in their minds. And we're being honest with everyone out here. This is an honest podcast where we tell it straight. So no magic here.
Okay, so some key takeaways. I'd say the biggest one is lay the infrastructure. If you don't have the infrastructure of PDM, you're going to struggle with whatever solution you go with, whether it's Senseye or something else. So lay the infrastructure, get the support, and figure out what you want to achieve with it. And those are I think that's honestly the biggest thing. It seems obvious when I say it, but when we start, it's often overlooked.
Yeah. No, I'll say concisely, and I think you've more concise than I could have imagined. No, that's really good. That's really good. And but like I said, I think the rest of of our discussion really, and especially the example you gave as well, I think that should serve to people that just put some thought through. Before don't get excited by the technology. And there's a lot of solutions in the market, lots of great vendors, lots of great products, including Senseye, of course, but no doubt other products as well, and great AI talk around. But just really consider your organizational strategy, I guess is what we're saying here. Think about what are the business outcomes you want to solve, and then think about how technology such as Senseye could help solve that.
I think the other big takeaway is educate yourself on PDM, on AI, on don't go past, sorry, marketing guys, but go past the marketing stuff and dig in deep and understand what it is. Because I've seen some, people out there promising like, oh, you don't ever have to interact with this. It's doing PDM for you. No, It's not. Maybe it's doing condition monitoring for you. You still have to action it. So understand what is predictive maintenance. We're not predicting when your machine will fail. We're predicting when you need to maintain it, which now, again, seems obvious. But I think clearing up those misconceptions, understanding what it is you're after, laying the infrastructure, those are the key points.
Yeah, exactly. And no offense taken, Natalie, it's fine. I know what marketing... No, you weren't talking about us. No. Yeah, like I said, even we can get too excited about things sometimes. So you're right. I think it's about cutting through some of the noise. I mean, there's a lot of noise, especially around this term predictive maintenance. I've seen over the past 3 years. I've sort of been involved with Siemens and Senseye. But yeah, so no, that's a really good session. So thank you, Natalie, for taking the time to go through that. Lots of takeaways for everyone. We will share a link to your previous session so you can really find out about the knowledge platform. It's really, it's fantastic, full of rich information. So please reach out to us if you're interested in finding out more about that. But so thank you to Natalie, and thank you to everyone for listening, and see you on the next episode.
Great. Thanks, Niall.
Thank you.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels, and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.